This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is Marissa Kepley, Kansas Farm Service Agency Farm Loan Specialist, as she mentions loan programs, good credit standing, and the importance of good communication. Romulo Lollato, K-State Wheat Production Specialist, keeps the show rolling with his Day 2 recap of the Kansas Winter Wheat Quality Tour. He talks about yield, diseases, and expectations for today. The Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, Dustin Pendell, and Brian Lubbers wrap up the show as they discuss the absorption of pour-on for cattle. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show hearing from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And today we're joined by Farm Loan Specialist Marissa Kepley. Marissa, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Marissa, as we're talking about things happening at the Farm Service Agency, a reminder for Kansas producers when it comes to applying for direct or guaranteed loans.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our FSA Direct Loan Program. Within that program, we offer farm ownership and operating loans to producers, those individuals who want to establish, maintain, or maybe strengthen their farm or ranch. Those direct loans are processed and approved and serviced throughout the life of the loan by our FSA farm loan staff in our local offices. Those operating loans can be used to either purchase livestock, equipment, or day-to-day operational expenses. So, purchase of fuel, chemicals, fertilizer, seed, feed, etc., that type of thing. Those loans are up to a $400,000 limit. Typical repayment, what we're looking at for those is a 7-year term. And then within our direct farm ownership loans, those loans can be used to purchase farmland or enlarge an existing farm through some sort of construction or maybe repair to buildings. And the maximum amount of loans for the farm ownership is $600,000 with a maximum repayment term of 40 years. So those direct programs, both the farm ownership and operating loans, those are both taken care of fully by our FSA farm loan staff. And we also have guaranteed loans. So the FSA guaranteed loans, those are loans that allow lenders in your local community to provide ag credit to farmers who maybe wouldn't typically meet the lender's normal underwriting criteria. So farmers and ranchers, walk into your local lender's door, you apply for the loan through your lender, and then that lender arranges with FSA for the guarantee. So kind of behind-the-scenes operations there. What that guarantee does is it provides some coverage for the lender in the event of any loss of principal or interest on the loan. Those guaranteed loans can be used for both farm ownership and operating purposes, just like the direct loans can. And those loans have a significantly higher limit. That's at $2.2 million. And the repayment terms are, rates and years that the loan is amortized, those are set by the lender, but they're typically similar to what you see under the FSA Direct program as well. Within Kansas here, recently we looked at activity. So the direct loan program, we've seen over 950 approved loans for over $168 million, and then under the guaranteed program, over 104 approved loans for just over $38 million here within the state. So all good dollars going to help our Kansas farmers and ranchers.
As we're thinking about our Kansas farmers and ranchers, what are some FSA programs that are more focused towards smaller or mid-size operations?
So, we're not here just to help established operations. We can provide financial assistance to both beginning farmers and small to mid-sized operations. So we have some program funds that are specifically designated to help financing eligible beginning farmers, and those are through either the direct or the guaranteed loan programs. And you might question, okay, what do we consider a beginning farmer? The highest points there are just, qualified beginning farmer applicants or those farmers and ranchers that have operated for less than 10 years. They don't own more than 30% of the county's average size farm in which their headquarters is located. And then across the board for all operators, our applicants have to be providing the majority of management decisions and labor for the farm operation. Now, our small to mid-size operations, if those loan limits that I talked about earlier under the direct and guarantee program seem like, way too much than what is necessary for smaller operations, we do offer what are called microloans. And those are particularly helpful to those small to mid-size farming operations. So those microloans, they've been used with operating costs, again, the feed, the fertilizer, tools, fencing, equipment, smaller livestock operations, and that sort of thing. And we've had those around since about 2013 is when we rolled that program out. It was designed specifically to simplify the application process, kind of expand loan purposes, and make it a little bit quicker turnaround for those smaller loans to help farmers strengthen their operations. And those loans specifically, the microloans, we can provide up to $50,000 to the qualified producers that apply for that program.
As we're thinking about loans, something probably pretty important for it, maintaining a good credit history. And what would you like to remind our listeners about when it comes to doing that?
We do have several eligibility factors for our loan programs, but one of the biggest ones is just a good credit history. So what we're looking at is when we receive an application, we do pull a credit report for all loan applicants. What we're using that report for is to just verify outstanding debts, check and make sure that their bills are paid timely, and to determine, how that existing debt that they have along with their new loan request is going to impact the financial position of their operation. So information on, an applicant's credit report that is strictly confidential. It's only used to aid us in conducting our business and a review of the loan. If an applicant does have any sort of derogatory items on the report, our loan staff will sit down and discuss options with them. We provide a copy of the credit report to them so that they can reach out to those credit bureaus to resolve maybe any potential errors. Kind of the biggest things to think of when you're looking at credit history and how do I maintain or improve my credit history. A couple simple things is just make sure you're paying your bills on time, pay down existing debt, keep those credit card balances lower, and then avoid any sudden opening or closing of credit accounts.
Marissa, as we're thinking about these different loans, are people able to have a loan in the different categories or different types of loans with the Farm Service Agency?
Yeah, absolutely. They can kind of mix and match between the direct and the guaranteed. We see that actually a lot. The biggest thing there is just to make sure that those borrowers are keeping open lines of communication with both FSA and their lender. From our side of things, we're committed to giving the borrowers the tools that they need to be successful. So that could include guidance from time to time throughout the loan application process, all the way to the time that they're ready to graduate onto commercial credit. Our loan staff is there to kind of advise and identify with the borrower, what their financial goals are, making sure that they're making progress towards those goals, but ultimately just making sure that the borrower is communicating with the loan staff when changes occur can help them the most in the long run. So some situations where, you might wonder, okay, do I need to call my loan officer to tell them what's going on? If they've got proposed or really big changes in the farming operation, so if they're picking up new ground or losing acres that they're farming or changes within their livestock operation, or if it's on the personal side of things, so changes to family income or expenses, loss or gain of employment or some unplanned bills, or, weather-related factors, other problems could come in. If storm comes through that destroys crops or equipment or maybe some illness that affects their livestock. Those are some of the big things that we want to make sure that we're talking to our borrowers about. And then if you've got, real estate, so borrowers that have pledged real estate as security for their loans, they're responsible for maintaining that collateral, and then they must get prior consent from FSA anytime that any changes are occurring. So if they're looking at leases or easements, which is becoming a more popular thing here in Kansas, so you think of wind, oil, or gas, a subordination where another lender might want to take a lien on the property to get some credit outside of FSA, or if maybe they're looking at downsizing and they're wanting to sell a portion of their property, just to keep those, like I said, lines of communication open with FSA or their guaranteed lenders, making sure that all lenders are aware of changes in the operation, or, if it's a situation where they're having some significant financial struggles and they're unable to make their payments to suppliers or other creditors or FSA, just encourage them to reach out to the local loan staff immediately to discuss any options that they might have.
And what progression of lending can take place with the Farm Service Agency?
FSA is a starting point for those beginning farmers or those recovering for some sort of financial difficulties. Unlike commercial loans, FSA loans, they're intended to be temporary in nature. So our goal is always to help those borrowers graduate onto commercial credit. Like I said, the loan staff is there to help work with the borrowers to identify their goals, make sure that they're financially successful, and we can, develop some strategies for them to meet those goals. Ultimately, all of it falls back onto the borrower. They're responsible for the success of the operation, but we're definitely there to help in an advisory capacity, provide them the tools to achieve those goals and manage their finances. And we want to look at that, what we call as graduation progression lending. So it might be you have a couple of loans with FSA, and one loan is able to graduate and move on to commercial credit, and then we gradually get you all the way moved on with all of your credit from a commercial lender.
And as always, when we're talking with the Kansas Farm Service Agency, where can people find out more information if they have questions?
If they want information, by all means, more than welcome. Stop by, visit with your local FSA staff in one of your offices, or if, you're thinking about things and just kind of see what's out there for FSA programs, they can go online to www.Farmers.gov, where they can learn about all the FSA programs that we have to offer.
Marissa, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much.
That was Farm Loan Specialist with the Kansas Farm Service Agency, Marissa Kepley. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Wednesday show with another update on the Winter Wheat Quality Tour from KStateAgron Production Specialist Romulo Lollato. Romulo, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Shelby. It's great to be here.
Romulo, from the wheat tour yesterday, what did you guys see?
So the wheat quality tour yesterday, we left Manhattan in 6 different routes, right? The northernmost route went all the way into Nebraska, and the southernmost route was kind of in the central part of the state. And those 6 routes, they moved from Manhattan all the way to Colby, right? So that was from that northeast, covering the entire central part of the state, all the way into Colby. And, very different things depending where you are in that spread from South Nebraska to central Kansas there. There was a very wide range of yields and crop conditions and problems that those different cars came up with. But essentially, if you give a summary of what that region is looking like, right, the northwest part of the state, and by that I mean a very large portion of the northwest, probably starting kind of like in Jewell County, which is central Kansas, really north central, and going west from there, there was very severe drought stress impacting the wheat crop. I knew things were dry out there, but had not been there in a little while, and I was surprised how dry the crop has, how much drought the crop has been exposed to, really. A lot of fields with very limited potential in that region, looking at 20, 25 bushels per acre. So a region that has been really badly impacted by season-long drought, really, right? Because those folks, they received some rainfall back in November, but then winter was dry and spring was dry as well, and they didn't get much of a relief that the remaining of the state got here probably 3-4 weeks ago. Now, the routes that went more on the central part of the state, right, they were reporting better yields. And again, it aligns with our expectations because that central part of the state did get some more rainfall. Reports of 3 inches plus in parts of the state there, and so it does align very well with what we were thinking, right? So essentially, again, in terms of how the crop's looking, leaving Manhattan immediately in that region, the crop's looking with a good yield potential, probably all the way until the central part of the state. And then if you are in the north end, it went south really quick in terms of yield potential there. More in the central part of the state, there was still decent potential, but then again, moving to the northwest quarter of the state, it got drier and drier. So that has been kind of the overall theme right now. Yesterday, the tour did close to 200 stops. It's not to go in and make a yield estimate, right? And yield estimates from the tour yesterday, they were ranging from, I believe, a low of about 15 bushels per acre and a high close to the 80s, 85s, right? And unless it was irrigated, there was irrigated field that came up north of 100 there. So a very wide range, as we would expect, right, for conditions across the state here of Kansas in such a variable year like this one. So another big issue that I have been talking about is, okay, what about the conditions of the crop regarding diseases, right? And I believe that 90% of those stops reported some level of wheat streak mosaic virus. Now, the region where we drove yesterday, I think that I don't know that there were too many fields that were simply devastated by the virus. I think that there was more high frequency, but maybe not necessarily a very high severity in most of those fields, right, on the region where we traveled yesterday. Now, it's not to say that there wasn't very high severity as well. There were a few fields, even one that I got in, another one that I just saw from the road, that were probably very, very impacted in terms of yield potential, and one of them is just going to be abandoned, one of the ones that I drove by, right? So just because it's bright yellow and foot height, right, just stunted and sprouted from that wheat streak mosaic virus. So that has been another big theme. So the two biggest themes that we saw yesterday were drought-stressed crop, especially in the northwest corner of the state, and again, a very large region at that, and very frequent wheat streak mosaic virus.
Did you see any other diseases while you were traveling to Colby?
No, very limited barley yellow dwarf here and there. I did not come across stripe rust, but I believe there was a car that came across the stripe rust a little bit south from where we were. So really the biggest concern that we have at this moment is the wheat streak mosaic, and unfortunately, there's nothing growers can do about that, right? It's a virus. Once it infects the plant, it's there, and not much we can do. Now, I mentioned, right, that where we were yesterday was perhaps not the worst in terms of wheat streak mosaic. Today, all of those routes that I mentioned, they are actually leaving Colby, going south, and then from there going east again back to Wichita, right? So again, 6 different routes, the southernmost one going into Oklahoma. And today I expect that we will drive by some regions with worse wheat streak mosaic infection. At the same time, if the fields were not infected by the wheat streak mosaic virus, perhaps we're going to see some good yield potential as well, right? Because this is the region where it got a bit more rainfall than the northwest. So I'm looking forward to see what we're going to learn today. Again, I'm expecting that we're going to see better crop, but I'm also expecting that we're going to see more fields that are infected more severely by wheat streak mosaic virus. So it's another year in Kansas, a lot of variability and issues that show up that we're perhaps not expecting, like these wheat streak mosaic virus that really blew up in the last couple of weeks. But it has been really good. Lots of participants. I think we have 61 different participants this year in a number of different cars doing stops. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, if growers see us stopping in their field, please come by and have a chat with us. It's great for these industry folks to get to know some KansasWheat farmers.
And Romulo, you mentioned abandoned fields a little bit earlier. So are you thinking you'll see more abandoned fields because of wheat streak mosaic virus more than drought stress?
That's a good question. Based on what I saw yesterday in the northwest corner of the state, I'll think that drought stress has been the biggest leading factor in that region. What we're going to see today, I'm still not sure. I think that there will be abandoned due to wheat streak mosaic virus, but I also know that far southwest Kansas, they are in D2 in terms of drought, right? So they are in the highest level drought in the state today. And so there's a chance that drought is going to take a toll in that very far southwest corner of the state as well. So it's a good question. I know that I have a good answer for it. I think that both issues are very problematic this season.
Romulo, as you traveled to Colby yesterday and are starting your travels to Wichita for today, what do you feel like overall has been the quality of the wheat?
Well, the quality of the wheat is really going to depend on yields, right? For the most part, there's a trade-off there: higher yields, lower quality, right? And so it really is going to depend on yields. Now, with that said, I think that there were many fields that have been planted into failed summer crops, and with that, there's also a high amount of nitrogen carry over from that summer crop, and the nitrogen is what's going to build protein. So my initial impression is, for the yield levels that we're going to have across the state this year, we'll likely have more nitrogen out there than what those yield levels would require, for the most part, right? And so that would result in higher protein as well. But again, at this time, that's kind of like a wild guess, right? But especially seeing some fields with low yield potential in northwest Kansas, that's definitely going to be the case over there. Now I'm looking forward to seeing what we're going to learn today. But again, since we have a lot of nitrogen carryover for many fields out there in the state this year, I would expect that protein would probably be on the high end.
Romulo, what are other ways people can stay up to date with the Winter Wheat Quality Tour?
Well, primarily, we are keeping our Twitter accounts, our X accounts updated, right? And so definitely can follow me at KSUWheat on X, or the Kansas Wheat Commission as well at KansasWheat. Both of those accounts are really putting out a lot of updates, and you can see other folks who are in the tour as well putting updates as you're connecting with those accounts.
Romulo, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime. I appreciate being here.
That was Kansas State University wheat production specialist Romulo Lollato providing another update on the Winter Wheat Quality Tour. We will hear from Romulo again tomorrow as he provides his final update for us on the Winter Wheat Quality Tour happening in Kansas. If you'd like to find more ways to stay up to date, you can do so by going to Twitter X and following along at KSUWheat. Again, that is at KSUWheat. You can also check out Kansas Wheat Commission's Twitter X, which is KansasWheat. Again, that is KansasWheat. Kansas Wheat Commission can also be found on their website, which is KSWheat.com. Again, that's KSWheat.com. They do also have other social media platforms where you can find them. I will link these different resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because when we come back, we'll be joined by Kansas State University's Beef Cattle Institute as they answer a listener question involving pour-on for cattle. We're now cutting to that short break. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and to conclude our show, we have part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, Dustin Pendell, and Philip Lancaster.
The listener asked about using a pour-on dewormer and said that they had heard you don't want to apply that over the kidneys because it could be associated with kidney or liver failure. They couldn't find any information on this. Bob, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm really not concerned about where a pour-on is applied on the animal. It's designed to be poured along the top line. But what happens really is that is absorbed right there at the skin into the blood system, and then it goes throughout the body. And so the pour-on that's applied over the back part of the back doesn't go to the kidneys any more than the pour-on that goes to the front, right over the shoulders. It's all going to go into the bloodstream.
The back of the back versus the front of the
back. Yeah, the front of the So it's all going to go, it's going to go through the bloodstream, and it's going to be filtered by the kidneys and the liver, but it's not preferential from where it was placed on the skin. So that's the beauty of these topical pour-ons is they get absorbed pretty well through the skin, and then they're going to go everywhere.
Otherwise, for things like dewormer, it's not effective if it doesn't go systematically.
Right.
So you talk about pouring it on, and it goes into the skin. Can it go into my skin if I'm pouring it on?
Good point. Yes, it can. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be maybe speak about more often is when we're using these pour-ons that are absolutely designed to be absorbed through thick cattle skin, well, yeah, it can go through human skin as well. And so you really should be wearing, latex gloves or, nitrile gloves to prevent that, because some people and some products that we use can cause health problems in humans if absorbed. And so it's really wise to use a barrier type of a glove when applying these porons, because that's exactly what they're designed to do, is be absorbed through the skin.
Well, and I think that is one of the things that there are multiple products, because they talked about a poron dewormer. There are several classes of drugs. There are also poron products that we use for other conditions as well. And with any of those, you've got absorption through the...
Right. Some are more likely to cause problems in humans than others, but I think it's just wise to just treat all porons as, well, recognizing that they're going to be absorbed through the skin, and so treat them accordingly.
So is this the same with injections? You talked about the location doesn't matter for the poron. Does it matter with the injections? Because we give a lot of injections in the neck.
Good point also. Yeah, exactly the same concept in that if I give an injection in the neck, it will be absorbed and go throughout the body. If I give an injection in the round or someplace else, it's going to be absorbed and go throughout the body. So it doesn't really matter. So an injection in the round isn't going to go preferentially to the back half of the animal, and an injection in the neck is not going to preferentially go to the front half of the animal. They go throughout the animal. So
if we use BQA guidelines, we can give them all in the neck and expect the same level of efficacy with any of the products that we give.
That's exactly right. I'm going to add just a couple more details. It is important to use the route that's on the label, and the main differences are subcutaneous or intramuscular. So if it's labeled to be intramuscular, it needs to go into a thick muscle, like in the neck. If it's subcutaneous, it needs to go under the skin and not in the muscle, if that's what's the label, because that does matter the products have been really designed for the amount of blood flow, the location, and for many products, there's some BQA reasons, some beef quality assurance reasons, some carcass blemish reasons to go subcutaneous if possible. But those products were made to go subcutaneous. And then there's a few products that just don't work very well subcutaneous. And so on the label, it says they have to go in the muscle, and they do. They have to go in the muscle.
So, Bob, kind of back to the poron discussion, how long does that take? What if it's going to rain? What do I need to do to make sure that product's effective?
Right. Well, rainfall is one of the things that can affect, how effective a poron is. And that, again, most of the time on the label, it will tell you how many hours you need to be sure that it doesn't get washed off by rain. And usually it's a handful of hours. So, again, none of us are perfect weather predictors. If you're using a poron, that is not effective to be using a poron on a day when the cattle are going to be out in a downpour. And so you do have to keep those things in mind as you kind of plan your processing days.
Once again, that was part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.